Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. It is Science Fiction Saturday again, and this time I've got 3 movies for you. One big one and 2 small ones, one of which can be considered one of the worst movies ever made. I didn't know that when I went to watch it, but that's the way it is. It's from 1964 and it's a thing called The Creeping Terror. But before I get to that, I've got 2 other movies for you. One of them is 1983's Brainstorm, directed by Douglas Trumbull, starring Christopher Walken, Natalie Wood, and Cliff Robertson, which is pretty damn good. And the other one is a really weird French movie, which Netflix just dropped, called Family Pack, also known as Loups Garous, which is a weird combination of Jumanji, a werewolf movie, and a French time travel movie from the 1990s called The Visitors. So let's get started. I'll start with Family Pack. I just happened to watch that one because I was cruising through Netflix, because I've got Netflix, I might as well use it, and happened to see that Jean Reno was in the movie. So I thought, okay, I'll give this one a go. And it's about mid. There's a whole bunch of mid-range, mid-interesting, mid-directed, mid-produced, mid-special effected movies that Netflix throws out. They've got a lot of money to throw into production, so they throw money into productions across the world, and you end up with kind of mid-entertainment. It's directed by Francois Ozon, who also directed some of the Lupin series that Netflix did, starring Omar Sy, which was quite good. But this one is fun while you're watching it, but not really memorable. The story is that a family goes to visit their father, played by Jean Reno, who is starting to suffer from dementia. As they're sitting around the table, they're having dinner in his cottage out in the countryside, and they find an old game, which is called Werewolves. And it's in a nice carved box. It's got a whole bunch of pieces that slot into recesses in the carving. And the father of the family, a guy called Jerome, played by Frank Dubosc, says, I remember this from my childhood. We found this in the attic. It's been in the family for hundreds of years. Let's play this game. And they start to play the game, and then there's this thing like an earthquake, and the whole house starts shaking. And so they go down into the cellar and hide from it. The earthquake thing ends. And then they emerge, and they're in the 1400s, in the same location, with the cottage as it originally was in the 1400s. And they wander into a medieval town and find that the town is being plagued by werewolves, and that the sheriff running the town is executing people that he thinks are werewolves. And suddenly there are these 5 weird people. There's a little girl, there's an older girl who is of mixed race. There are 2 parents, and they're from a blended family, so some of the kids are from one parent, some are from the other, and the little girl is their shared child. And suddenly they're in this weird world where A, they've got to survive, B, to get back to their own time, they've got to identify all of the werewolves and kill them, and C, they've got to stop the people in the village itself from killing them. So it's got a little bit of a feel for The Visitors, because of course Jean Reno was in that as well. And Jean Reno's father is an interesting character, because when they go back in time, his cognitive decline is reversed. While he's in the past, he has all of his marbles. And I find that a kind of interesting arc, because they've got to get back to their own time. But when they do, they know their father is going to be diminished again. So there's a little bit more there than there would be in some other movies. And when they get to the past, they find that each of them has a superpower. The daughter, who is a social media influencer, becomes invisible and silent. People can't see or hear her, which is kind of ironic. The father, whose name is Gilbert, becomes a hunter. He's very strong. And the son, who is Jerome, finds out that he can hear the thoughts of other people. And so each of them has a power. And for most of the movie, we don't know what the power of his wife is. And her name is Marie. She's played by Suzanne Clement. And she doesn't know what her power is either. But we find out later that she has a power. So we get the usual things where the weird people are in the village, and the villagers don't really trust them, except for an artist who is an Italian guy who's come to France to live for a while, who's very tall, very weird, and very gay. And he takes a fancy to Jerome, which is kind of fun and interesting, and they have a kind of bromance, but on one side of it, the romance is a little bit more than that, and it's treated respectfully. It's not done as comic relief. It's done as, okay, you're gay, but in your world, if you admit you're gay, you're going to get killed and drawn and quartered, so we'll keep it on the down low. So it's kind of got some interesting aspects to it. And Jean Reno is very good in the role of playing the Father Gilbert. He plays him with diminished capacity quite well. He plays him in the heroic mode very well as well. All of the actors are great in this. There's some really solid acting for this kind of film, and probably a little bit above what you'd really need to make this kind of movie. And Netflix is pumping these things out monthly. It's amazing how much, well, we'll use the word they would use, product, they're pumping out, particularly in the science fiction and fantasy realm. They're doing it from all over the world. They're doing movies in Turkey, they're doing movies in France, they're doing them in Italy, they're doing them everywhere. They're doing it here in Australia as well. They're putting out all of this stuff, which is grist for the mill, and it's going to go into the Netflix streaming thing. My concern is, what happens to all these films after Netflix no longer puts them up on their roster? How are they being preserved? And how are they going to be given to an audience? Because there are movies that Netflix has put out, which I think deserve to have physical media releases. Things like the reconstructed Other Side of the Wind from Orson Welles. And even a movie like this, Family Pack, would get a bit of an audience. It's a bit of fun. It's adventure. It's got that kind of combining of various different movies in Jumanji and The Visitors and a few other bits and pieces there. And, of course, any werewolf movie you get a name. So it'd be interesting if there was a way for these to be put even in just like a box set of 10 Netflix science fiction or genre films. I'd appreciate that. I think it may well get an audience as well. Because at some stage, these are going to become nostalgic. And people go, hey, remember that movie with Jean Reno and the werewolves that I saw 10 years ago? People are going to be curious about them. And people are going to want to find them. And I don't know whether there's a channel for them to find them. But we'll see. So that one was kind of fun, but again, not memorable. We'll forget it in a couple of weeks after watching it. But that doesn't mean it's not worth watching while you're watching it. The second one is The Creeping Terror, which is a cheapo 1964 American science fiction movie, which is actually filmed in 1962 by a very dodgy guy called Vic Savage, who ended up running away before the movie was released to an audience. And the guys who put up the money ended up releasing it. It's the dodgiest movie you've ever seen in your life. It was filmed on the Spahn Ranch, the ranch, George Spahn's ranch, where the Manson family lived for a long time. It was filmed there before Manson and his mob moved there. And it's got a weird structure. For a start, all the audio is post-dubbed. There's either a little bit of ADR and a bit of dubbing done afterwards. And there's also a lot of the storytelling is done by a voice-over narrator.
This man's name is Martin Gordon. The lovely girl beside him is Brett, his bride of 2 wonderful weeks. They're returning from their honeymoon to their home in quiet, peaceful Angel County, California.
Story is that in Angel County in California, which doesn't actually exist, a spaceship crashes into the countryside, and it gets investigated first by a cop who is on his way back from his honeymoon with his girlfriend, and then by the military and by other police and things like that. And this spaceship has a monster in it. The monster looks like, well, it looks like ambulatory vomit. It's like a big long rug with somebody underneath the rug in a rubbery suit attached to the front of the rug. It looks like a giant slug. And to be fair, I kind of like the way the monster looks, even though it doesn't do anything useful apart from swallowing people. You know, couples who are necking on a blanket and people whose car gets wrecked and other things. So most of the movie is people in costumes, either as police people or teeny boppers or the army, wandering around while these monsters get loose. And the military sends some guys into the spaceship, which has got all this army surplus equipment in it, pretending to be an alien spaceship, and they're trying to investigate where the monsters came from, why they're here. There's a lot of bits where the voiceover tells us what their investigation has resulted in, and some of it's a long bow to draw from the evidence that they present. It's very, very bad. Ed Wood had a certain charm in the movies he made. Plan 9 from Outer Space has a certain charm and a certain professionalism It's not a movie that was filmed on Sparns Ranch with a giant blanket for the alien monster and a bunch of untalented non-actors playing the acting roles. I watched it this afternoon. I thought, I'll get a second movie to go with Brainstorm. And so I watched it this afternoon thinking I could get something from it. But the red flags were there. First off, if it's a science fiction movie from the 1960s, of which I have not heard, chances are it's the bottom of the bucket. And indeed, this one is. It's incredibly bad. For some reason, it got a Blu-ray release. I think everything gets a Blu-ray release eventually. If it's more than 30 or 40 years old, somebody will put out a Blu-ray or a 4K of it and it'll find an audience. For this movie, The Creeping Terror, to get a Blu-ray release is quite extraordinary. If I was to pay what I thought it was worth as a Blu-ray, I'll be reaching for pocket change. It's a really bad science fiction movie. It's not worth your time watching. I regret the amount of lifespan I spent watching it. It is crap, but I suppose if you were self-medicated with a group of fellow self-medicatees, you might get a little joy from it. But it's not likely. I really regret watching that one. And I'm going to try to do better in future. That then takes us to the movie from 1983 that I think is underrated as a science fiction movie, because it's got a lot of things I like in science fiction. It's got some actors I like. It's got Christopher Walken for a start, Natalie Wood, Cliff Robertson, Louise Fletcher, fantastic, stealing the movie. Directed by Douglas Trumbull, who did the special effects for 2001 and a bunch of other things. Brainstorm. Again, this is a movie that I found out I didn't have a physical copy of, and I regret not having a physical copy of it. It's now sitting in my Amazon wishlist, and I will get a copy of it when I work out my finances on that. Good science fiction, great special effects, terrific acting, and a script by Bruce Joel Rubin is pretty good, and it has some moments in it that really land and support the concept. In the movie, Christopher Walken plays Michael Brace, who, with his friend Lillian, they've been working for 10 years on a project in a lab run and owned by Cliff Robertson's character, and they've had a breakthrough. They've invented a way of recording human experience and delivering it to another person. They put it on a big shiny tape and can deliver it back, and you get everything. You get sight, you get sound, you get all of the sensory inputs, you get all of the feelings, and you get the emotional states as well. So it's a complete recording of a human experience. While you're wearing the helmet and the tape is running, you can record everything you see, hear, feel, do, eat, drink, and everything else. So they have a breakthrough, and it works. And Michael and Lillian present it to Alex, played by Cliff Robertson, and say, this thing works. And Alex says to them, Michael, you're going to have to work with your estranged wife, Karen, played by Natalie Wood, who is designing the headsets that we're going to wear to make this go. Is that going to be a problem for you? And Michael says no, Karen says no, and they end up working together for the first time as they're breaking up and selling their house and separating on this project to get this product, which has never given a name, to a market. And the beautiful thing is you see progress from an enormous bulky helmet attached to a large cart full of equipment down to something where you get a headset, you get a little box, and you can hook it up to acoustic coupler modem and transmit the thing through a phone line. Data transfer rates for that don't really make it a viable thing, but you allow that in the context of the movie. But Lillian's cynical because she's had a previous project with Alex which went belly up because of interference from the higher ups, the military industrial complex. And this is a technology which can be weaponized quite easily. Michael, being an innocent, doesn't realize that, but Lillian sees that potential and is concerned that Alex is going to sell it to the military and they will weaponize it, which is indeed what happens. Now, Lillian's a wonderful character. I remember seeing this movie, and the only previous movie I'd seen with Louise Fletcher in it was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where she played Nurse Ratched, and totally different character. And Lillian is a warm and friendly character. They have a platonic love between Michael and Lillian. They've worked together for 10 years. They're incredibly close friends. And Lillian's a chain smoker and has a heart condition. Meanwhile, a guy called Hal, who works with them, gets a sex tape made with this technology. And Hal has a mental breakdown. He gets this sex tape and he creates a tape loop of just the orgasm. And he hides away in his den and plays it continually for himself. It has an enormous breakdown. and basically his brain's rewired by the fact he's had continuous orgasms for a long time, and he gets something like a petit mal epileptic seizure at times as an after effect of that. Hal becomes very useful when Michael and Karen decide to take the technology back from the bad guys. But there's this really creepy bit where you've got a sex tape made with this technology, which shows that the technology can be used for carnal purposes. It's the ultimate red tube. But you also see Michael and Karen test the technology out, and Michael receives a brief recording of Karen, which he takes in the lab, and he realizes that there are estrangements caused by the fact that they don't really know how the other person feels. And so they go through this beautiful arc of she's made this tape for him, and then he made a tape for her saying how he felt about her and how his recollections of their relationship were. We see this technology creating a bridge between two human beings who essentially love each other, but their inability to feel how the other person feels has estranged them. And that's interesting because it shows this technology has enormous possibilities in bringing people closer together. So you've got that one aspect of it there. You've got the aspect of Hal creating an infinite orgasm loop from the tape. And then you've got the military-industrial complex, which comes in and does some very different things with it. They can create psychotic episodes for people. They can torture people using this technology. And that also plays into the arc of the story. So the great thing is that this movie sets up, there's this breakthrough technology. You can record everything a person feels and everything a person experiences, including their emotional states and things like that. And you can transmit it to another person or another group of people. There's enormous potential for mind control in this technology as well, which is lightly touched on in the narrative. So the movie gives us a solid science fiction concept. This machine is invented. These are the potential consequences of that machine. The adult entertainment one, the repairing of relationships one, experiencing things you can't experience otherwise, and then the weaponization of the technology. You've got to remember, this is 1983. It's still in the Cold War. We see a factory where military tech is being assembled to be deployed to troops. We don't find out what that's for. It could well be to give them skills they don't have otherwise, because we do see a scene where Michael learns how to play the piano because Karen wore the helmet while she was playing the piano, and the physical skills of playing piano are transmitted to Michael. So there's all of this implications to this movie that make it really interesting. Natalie Wood's extremely good. Walken is much warmer than he normally is in this. Louise Fletcher is fantastic as Lillian, and she has a scene where she's dying and records herself at the time of death, which then rolls into the upshot at the end of the film. And a moment where Michael experiences some form of transcendence. Some people would give it a theological background. For me, there's a couple of possibilities. One, the whole world is a simulation, and Michael has administrative privileges to that simulation when he uses the machine. The other possibility is that there are intelligences greater than us who are harvesting the minds of people when they die. But some people have a theological interpretation of it because they were raised that way. All interpretations of this transcendence we get in this movie are valid. Now, of course, the movie was not quite completed because of the death of Natalie Wood when she drowned off the coast of Catalina on a boat. I'm not going to go into did somebody kill her, did somebody not kill her. I don't know enough to know, but all I'm talking about is the context of this movie. And of course, it was her last film. Walken was on the boat. Robert Wade was on the boat. That's all I'm going to say on that. I think the movie's complete enough that we get a full picture of the intention of the creators. And there was a problem when Natalie Wood died. They had all of this trouble with the studio. The studio just wanted to shit can it and get paid out by Lloyd's of London, who had the insurance policy for the movie. But Lloyd's of London talked to Trumbull and said, "Can you complete the movie?" And he said, "Yeah," and told him how. And Lloyd's of London gave him a few $1 million to complete the movie when the studio didn't particularly want it to be completed. They wanted the payout because their cash flow would look better if they did. But Trumbull stuck to his guns. The insurance company had a lot of power in this. And so they did that, but the studio didn't particularly promote the movie because they were still pissed off that Trumbull didn't go behind their back but liaised with the insurance company and told them the truth that the movie could be completed. So there was all of this shitstorm going on in the background. But for me, Brainstorm is an underrated film. I like the way it tells a science fictional story, the implications of a technology, the way the world is going to change because of this technology. All that stuff's there, both on a kind of global level with the militarization of the technology and on a very personal level where we see the personal threats and the personal potential of this groundbreaking technology. It's a solid science fiction movie and incredibly underrated. It doesn't have pew-pew, it doesn't have spaceships, it doesn't have little glowy fingered aliens in it. It's a solid science fiction movie for grown-ups, and I like it a lot. It may be in my top 10 of science fiction movies of the 1980s for that reason. And I think that Douglas Trumbull is an underrated creator as well. Didn't particularly like Silent Running because there's a lot of stupid shit in Silent Running. I like this one a lot, and I think it may be my favourite Christopher Walken movie. It's got so much guts and heart to it that doesn't get appreciated enough by people who like science fiction movies. Let me know what you think of Brainstorm. Some people like it, some people don't. For me, it hits. It is incredibly underrated. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is a movie that should have a Criterion edition, or at least Imprint or Umbrella putting out a 4K of it, because there are some beautiful bits. All of the experiences that people have with this technology, that's all shot in 70mm widescreen with a really wide aspect ratio, whereas all of the stuff that happens in the real world is actually in a smaller aspect ratio, not 3:2, but 1.76 to 1 or something like that. So when somebody is experiencing the thing, the screen widens out and becomes a lot more vivid and a lot clearer, which I kind of like. So that's what I got for you this time around. 3 movies, 2 of which are forgettable and dismissible. The third one I think is very underrated. Let me know what you think about these movies, whether you've seen The Creeping Terror, whether you've seen Family Pack, whether you've seen Brainstorm, and whether you like them or not. You might want to check out Family Pack if you're in the mood for something light. A little bit of fun. It's not going to do you any harm. Creeping Terror, on the other hand, may well piss you off. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can support the channel as well by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies or by becoming a channel member. Next up, I've got the live stream, which is happening Monday morning at 7 a.m. Melbourne, Australia time. You can figure that out for yourself, but I already have it waiting on the queue. So if you go to my channel page, you're going to see that there's a live stream waiting for Monday morning. Going to be talking about weird things that happen to me in cinemas. Going to be talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. Going to be talking about some weird movie news that I found out about. It's all fun. It's very interactive. The chat is always lively on the live streams, so you might want to be around for that. And if you can't, it's always good fun to watch it back. Then we've got the Wednesday video, and hopefully by then I'll have got a whole bunch of good stuff from Imprint that I'm going to show you. So until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Don't watch The Creeping Terror. You're going to hate me if you do. And I'll catch you next time.